Okay, we're live.
Thank you, Becca. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the January 6th, 2022 meeting of the Northborough Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Becca, do you have the governor's statement?
Yes, I do. Okay, pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency signed into law June 16, 2021. This meeting will be conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted. This meeting will be live streamed, but will have no option for public participation. To view or listen only, visit the YouTube link posted on the agenda on the town's website.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda tonight is the approval of the November 4th, 2021 and December 2nd, 2021 meeting minutes. Did anybody have any additions, subtractions, questions on the meeting minutes? Seeing none, so roll call vote. Miriam Ibrahimi.
Do we have to make a motion to approve? Or is it?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I did need a motion to approve. Sorry.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Moved by Miriam, seconded by Chica. Roll call vote. Miriam Ibrahimi,
Aye.
Mary Leach,
Aye.
Chica Holland,
Aye.
Becca Meekins,
Aye.
and I, Tim Kalin, vote aye. So meeting minutes are approved. So the next item on the agenda is to review and finalize the presentation for the Board of Selectmen. So Miriam and I have been working on the presentation, and for the presentation, I will be presenting the first half of the presentation, and then Miriam is going to present the second half to the board. So I just wanted to run that by everybody and make sure that that was okay with the committee, and nobody had any reservations about that.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay. So we just basically broke it up. The first half is just thank yous, a recap of the presentation that was made in July, a review of the timeline, scope, and what our mission statement is, and then pass it off to Miriam. I can share, let me see if I can pull that up. Just give me 1 second. Becca, if you give me, oh, I can do it right here. Okay. Give me 1 second. All right, can everybody see that?
Yep.
All right. So just a review of the scope and charge of the committee. I think it's just important so that, just as a reminder, what it is that we set out to do. A review of the timeline, just to give an overview of what we've been up to for the last 12 months. our mission. And then that's where Miriam would come in with the recommendations. I don't know why a lot of the stuff didn't come through, but. So real simple, real straightforward, more talking than words on the slide. But just to get through that in 3 to 4 minutes, so we can get to the important stuff of the recommendations. And I know that Deidre had brought up some questions on the why, like why we're making the recommendations that we're making. And I think that speaking to the mission statement and using that as the anchor, as the why we're making the recommendations that we're making. I mean, ultimately, we want to make Northborough and keep improving the inclusiveness in making our community more, continue to be welcoming to people of all different backgrounds. And that's really the focus of the recommendations that we're making. Any questions on that? Okay. And Miriam, do you want to share?
I can go ahead and share my screen. This is a draft. I have like a couple more slides that I wanted to add to the end of it. But I focused on public outreach and what we've done as a committee and recommendations. Talked about the direct action, how we put out statements in solidarity, and making a Facebook group. And then immediate actions, including like recognition of Juneteenth and Indigenous Peoples Day, and then staffing, recruitment, training, and then what we had written down for that. And then community engagement and sense of belonging. I have a couple more slides to add to that. And then we have a fifth one as well. And then when I have that done, I'll share that with you guys. Yeah. Anybody have any questions or want me to stop at any slide to see particularly?
I think it would be great to go a little slower so we can actually sleep.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Scroll.
Just let me know when to move.
I had a question on this slide for
Mhm.
everybody. I know that, when you're talking through why we're making the recommendation to establish the committee as a permanent committee is, the feedback that we've gotten from all the different people that we talked to, and we feel that we're a resource for all the various departments in the community as a whole. Do we want to mention here anything about the strategic plan here? I think part of the role of the making the committee permanent is if the Board of Selectmen does choose to move forward with that we would take this committee would take the lead on working with the consultants that were brought in.
You mean like kind of when we discussed this slide, kind of clarifying to the board that we're not asking them to take the lead on this. We're telling them that like, if we create a permanent committee, our committee would sort of be responsible for continuing the work. Does that make sense?
What if we have some bullets underneath your main task here of how you're going to accomplish this?
I honestly wanted to keep this. I can definitely add bullets from our report. I kind of just wanted to keep it like clean and then just talk about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I'll
No.
definitely obviously go in depth with every single slide. But yeah.
Yeah. Tim, you were just kind of giving a suggestion around the talk track
Yeah.
for Marion. Yeah. Okay. I think that makes sense to include in your talk track for sure. It sounds like you were going to go down that path to some degree, Marion. Yeah. Okay.
Becca,
I
what do
think-
you think?
Me? Is that me? Oh, I was going to, I think in the recommendations themselves, on this first point, which is the establishment of a permanent advisory committee, it talks about obviously the feedback we got through, the discussions we had with community members. And it also talks about sort of, the work is not finished, it's really just begun. And sort of framing it as, we want to be able to shepherd through, with the board's guidance and their blessing, all of these changes that we think are going to be really positive for the community, and sort of framing it up that way. And one of those things is certainly the strategic planning process. And I think that in the section that talks about the strategic plan, I break down a little bit, like we're hoping the board will allow the DEIB committee to participate and have an active role in that process with that consultant. So it's sort of framed up that way in the recommendations.
But do you think including it here in the presentation makes sense? Or I think it's an important point just to bring up in the presentation itself, to verbalize that a strategic plan is included in the recommendations. And if
Well,
it
are we
should-
going to add, is that going to be added, Miriam? Are you going to add that as a fifth point? Because I think it's added in the recommendations as a
And-
final.
I think the fifth point is that, and I'll add that as the last, I have a couple more to add about the community engagement, and then I'll add that as a number 5. Like I've taken this from our report and I'll write it as is.
Okay,
Um,
so you'll add another slide for that then.
yes.
All right, perfect.
Yeah, I think you just follow the layout of the report. It's
Exactly.
number 1 is establish the committee. Number
Right.
2, 2 quick things we can do to. So yeah, I think that's the way to go. And I like, personally, I like that the slide is more basic and straightforward, and then it gives you the opportunity to speak and also sort of react to the questions or the comments that come up. You're not like tied to whatever is written on the slide, which I prefer.
Right. That was what I was trying to go for.
Miriam,
Um,
I'm sorry. I just have a
yes.
question on the slide before this one.
Yes.
Yeah, this direct action. So this is just trying to describe what we've done already, right?
Yes.
Okay. Like I'm I don't know if it comes through with the direct action title. Yeah.
As you said that, I'll clarify, maybe saying like direct action from the committee.
Yeah, or even like actions taken, or like, yeah, or like 2021 actions taken, something like that, just so that it's like, oh, okay, because I thought this was what we were going to try to do. And then when I read it, I was like, oh,
Absolutely.
this is what we did already. Okay, that's all.
Thank you for that. That makes sense.
No problem.
Okay.
I'm with you here.
Yeah, it looks good.
Also in the last sentence at the very bottom, I want to add, especially the ones, I want to add an S there. I'll put that as a note for myself. Proofreading myself as well.
Are those, I don't know if those are
Oh my God. Yes.
standardized comments. Okay.
That's so funny. That is, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Those
That's what this is for.
those are, yes, that makes so much sense. The first one is accurate, the rest are not. Sorry about that.
It's all good.
That's quite a powerful recommendation to the board.
Like, that's so good. Again, these are like, this is language taken from our report, so it won't be anything like shocking or new. So funny.
I have a quick question on the
Yes.
immediate actions that the board can take.
Yes.
Did we want to also include anything around June being Pride Month and either flying the flag or just recognizing that in some way in the town? I don't know if that's immediate or not, but it seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, we had talked about that a little bit. The reason I didn't include it in the recommendations is because it doesn't require like a formal action. Like these two things require town meeting action. So there's like an administrative process that we have to go through where we actually have to modify our bylaws, change the language. It has to go before a bunch of boards and committees because that's the process for changing the bylaws. So that's why I wanted to include these specifically in these immediate actions because it requires like staff. We're going to have to do some back end work to prepare for this.
Okay.
June, you know, I do want the board to do some recognition of Pride Month, but I'm kind of hoping that like we can get this through and then we'll, you know, so long as the board agrees to continue with the committee, which I am very confident that they will, that can be something that we come back to them, you know, in the early spring, late winter. That was my interpretation, but again, I'm open to having a discussion about it if people feel otherwise.
Is that part of the community calendar? and
Yes,
Engagement?
I think, I think Pride, yeah, it is.
Section right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's totally fine. Let's keep moving.
I also wanted to ask you guys a question about something I was thinking about in terms of immediate action that we can add to the report. Like the adoption of gender inclusive language when it comes to like town documentation, including forms and like the titles of town officials. So like changing the name of the Board of Selectmen to Select Board. And I was curious if that's something that we can have a conversation about, because I think that would be an effective way for us to implement that, the board to implement that. Would that have to be something that goes through town meeting?
That is something that the board had already, the board actually discussed it when I was on the Board of Selectmen, and there was, at the time, general agreement that a change needed to be made. It's just a very time-consuming process to make the changes. It's not simply just changing it, you know, on the headers of documents. It's
right.
The whole town charter needs to be changed. All the, you know, anything that says select board on it in any official town document, they need to go through and make all those changes. And then I believe there's also a process that the approval of the change needs to go through that's pretty extensive. Town meeting, ballot votes. So it's not something that's easy to get done. But at the time, the discussion was that once the pandemic was over, then it would be addressed at that point. And at the time, nobody thought that the pandemic would be 2 years, you know, going on 2 years. So
So what are other communities throughout the Commonwealth doing? Because personally, I don't like to be a follower. I'd rather be a leader. So what are we seeing? This is new to me. So what are you seeing out there?
So
A bunch of communities have made the change. And again, it's not something that anybody's opposed to. It's just more of time and resources that the people that would need to do the work to make the changes just don't have right now.
Sure.
It's just-
So I think if people are in favor of it, though, I think we should recommend it. I think as a DEI committee, I think it would be still important to include it in the report and bring it forth to the board and say, well, we really think that this is important, because I think this is, for me, it's almost like an obvious thing to have gender inclusive language. And so I researched into, other towns in Massachusetts, and I think over 60 towns have changed it. And since 2020, there have been a lot more towns that have adopted this language. And then in addition to that, the Massachusetts Selectmen's Association also changed their name to the Massachusetts Select Board Association. So I think this is something that is important in demonstrating that, we are a diversity and inclusion committee, and we should bring forth this recommendation.
I would agree.
With you.
Can you scroll down to the next slide, number 3?
Yeah.
If we were going to include it, I would advocate to include it in number 3 and not in number 2, just because number 2 is immediate. Like if you scroll up to number 2.
Then you have to change the title of your slide.
Mm-hmm.
If you scroll up to so immediate actions for the board. Like to make the recommendation that they make the change, I know they can't take it on immediately. So to put it under the immediate actions.
Scroll down.
Here's what I think. I think when we say immediate actions, I think we can put it on both slides. I think if we say immediate actions for the board, like moving forward, anything that's like online, like we don't have to go back and change everything. I'm saying moving forward, let's say like we come out with something, there's a document that comes out, it says select board on it. And I'm not saying like we have to go through everything right now. That can be on number 3 and say, okay, when we have the opportunity and the ability to do so, that can be a moving process. You understand what I'm saying? Like
I feel like it could be a phased. Yeah, sorry, Miriam. It can be a phased approach, and I don't know if the team talked about that when that came before the board the last time. But it almost sounds like it was, oh my goodness, we're gonna have to update this, and this. Let's abandon this idea for now because it's just too much. And I get that. But if we look at it as, smaller chunks and sort of phase it out and present it maybe in that fashion, we might have more of an appetite to make the change. Because if we are advising the board and we're saying it's the Board of Selectmen, when we're trying to say that we're advocating for inclusivity as a committee, I think it's a bit of a disconnect. So I'm just trying to figure out, in partnership with what Miriam's saying, like, is there a way we might be able to present it as a phased approach, and they might feel a little bit more comfortable, and kind of understand that we've heard them and understand where they've been, and try to see if we can find a happy medium.
So, okay, so for me, like if I didn't know what you guys were talking about, to go from immediate, the previous slide to this slide, I feel like the titles don't flow, like you're losing me. So I think that changing the title to the Board of Selectmen does belong on slide 3, but I think you need to change the title. What is the title of slide 4?
It's community
I feel like immediate, not long-term, but immediate, and then I don't know, second level or something, you know what I mean? Like immediate change.
Short term and long term?
Short-term, yeah, short-term, long-term. I just feel like going from immediate to whatever this slide 3 title is, you're losing me.
Do we
Because
have- Go ahead. Sorry, Mary. Go ahead.
you follow me?
Yeah, I am. I was gonna say, do we have an agenda slide or like something that lays out all the
I would do
sections?
like
that we're
a
planning on?
table of contents at the beginning.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
that in mind.
Okay.
Okay.
let's do that.
Like, I wonder, Mary, if that would help, and like, instead of just listing everything, Miriam, maybe you can just
Mhm.
say like, this presentation is going to outline these things, which aligns with the recommendation, you know, so then that way they kind of have that connection. Like, okay, we're kind of following the flow of the recommendation. I don't know,
Got it.
Mary, if that, do you think that might help, Mary? Or you think it's still going to be tough to follow?
Like the short-term and long-term. That's how I work.
Hmm. I just
You-
think some of these, like some of the items in these other buckets might also fall into short term. Are these all long term? Like beyond the immediate?
They're different.
Like they're all different topics? I don't know.
But a medium, short-term, long-term.
Hmm.
it
I
could
mean, one of the
also-
problems is that some of these things are already happening.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So-
it's rough.
That was,
think-
and I. Go
Something
ahead.
else I could also do is make another slide that kind of breaks it down, and that I can make like a chart that says currently in like actively happening, short term, long term, and that would like help wrap it up at the end. Would that help?
Yeah.
Would it be helpful if in the slide with immediate, can you just scroll to that one for a second, Miriam?
Sure.
If in this slide, it was just, instead of immediate actions for the board, just change the title of it. And then on the slide, single slide, short-term recognition of Juneteenth, permanently rename, and then long-term, change the, gender-specific language around board names and so forth.
Okay, all on slide 2, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, and then what happens to slide, go up to slide 3?
So this slide 3 is a section in the recommendations. It's recommendations around staffing, recruiting, and training. So these are separate from 2, like it's just a different bucket of
Yeah.
recommendations. So in this recommendations, these are these things that we're recommending. Whereas in
So what if we
2,
have 1 recommendations and 1A is short-term, 1B is long-term, and then number 2, staffing, recruitment, and training.
well, 1 is the permanent establishment of the committee. That's recommendation 1.
Yeah,
And then
right.
recommendation 2 is the actions that the board can take. And we'll have short-term and long-term.
Long-term, okay, all right, so recommendation 3.
3 would be staffing, recruitment, and training. 4 would be the calendar, and 5 would be the strategic plan.
Okay, I follow you, Yeah, I like that.
Miriam, does that make sense?
Say it one more time.
So
Go
if
back.
you go to slide 2.
Okay.
So instead of it being immediate actions for the board, it would have to be another title for the slide. I don't know what it's called in the report, but just change that actions for the board, recommended actions for the board, and then have under that short-term actions, which is recognition of Juneteenth and permanently renaming. And then long-term actions, the gender-specific language around board names and the other stuff.
All under actions for the board.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all on the same slide, all on
Okay.
this slide.
So I just want to point out real quick, I'm a little bit hesitant because all of these are recommended actions by the board, so I don't want to confuse them. The reason I chose the immediate language is because this is something that the board, all the board has to say is yes, and these things happen. with the third one that is talking about changing all the language, again, I know it's something the board would be in favor of, but it does, like Tim was saying, it requires a much more significant administrative lift to do the change to select board. And my other thought is that one of the things that we point out under the scope for the strategic plan is to review all of the policies, procedures, and bylaws, the language included in those, and making sure that it is, you know, that it's gender inclusive, that it's inclusive across all identities. And so I just don't want to be duplicative in our recommendation, because I think that the select board change and all the gender inclusive language and everything else is going to come out of that strategic planning process, which we will be involved in. And then that way it gives us a little bit more time staff wise, like Tim was saying, a little bit more, it gives us more resources, because then we have the consultant who's assisting us, who can sort of work with us through those changes. And it just adds another layer of support by having a consultant on board saying, yes, this is the right move. So that if there is any pushback or whatever, we all, you know, we can say that, like, these are professionals who are recommending this change. And that kind of support is always helpful for a board when they're looking to make a big change like that. So. Just
So
look
with
at that.
Word-
If in the additional slide that Miriam's going to add for the strategic plan, if there's a bullet point on that slide around gender inclusive language, would that work for everybody?
Yeah, so instead of putting on immediate actions, you can add it to the section about sense of belonging or strategic planning.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That works.
Becca, does that work?
Yeah, I'm just looking at this section that talks about the scope of work. So,
I just don't want to leave it out. I think it's really important to include somewhere.
I agree.
yeah, so I think I've modified what's in the, right now, the language as it's written in the recommendations, for the scope of work for the strategic plan says, audit/assessment of current policies and procedures as it relates to diversity and inclusion, includes policies of all departments, including public safety, includes hiring, recruitment process, outreach, advertising, applicant tracking, selection process, internal and external communication, overall agency culture, professional development, provide recommended changes or additions to improve overall outcomes. So I think in that bullet, we should just add some language that's a little bit more specific around gender inclusive language, or just honestly, just inclusive language for all policies and procedures of the town. And then that would cover the bylaws, it would cover all the department policies, all the department procedures, so that everything moving forward that gets developed and everything that we have to change has inclusive language.
Can you just
Does that make
add to
sense?
that? Can you just add to that and board names?
That would be in the bylaw, but yeah.
Just so it's clear. I know if I'm just thinking, if you're an average person, you're reading that, you're not going to know that.
Agree.
Yeah, I mean, remember, this is the scope for the strategic plan. So, like, you know, when we work with the consultant, yeah, that would be something that we would point out. But I think you're right that it's important to have written explicitly so that the board understands that it's them that we're talking about.
Yes.
And all of the boards and committees that they appoint and create and so forth.
Yeah. Okay. Everybody good on that?
Mhm. Very good.
Okay.
We got through this slide. you want me to go.
I think we were good on that one. And then community engagement.
There's 3 or 4 more points to that. Hold on, let me pull it up.
Are you gonna add anything about the Lyceum? Okay.
I'll add a slide about the Lyceum and a slide about like working together with the Coalition for Equity and the school, like partnering with them. Yeah.
All right, so you'll add those additional, the additional number 5 and then the additional slide on the Lyceum and, okay,
I will get those done and share them with all of you so that everybody can look through it and give me any of their edits, whatnot. Yeah, that sounds good.
Good job. It's a lot of
Yeah.
work.
did you want to, Miriam, did you want to include, add my slides? I like that, the format of those slides. Do you want to just copy mine into your presentation? Is that in PowerPoint or is it?
Yeah, it's through PowerPoint. I can add
Okay.
them in. Yeah,
Okay,
not too hard. Sounds good. Of
perfect. Thank you very much.
course.
All those years of college, learn how to do slides. I remember being in school and sitting and watching people doing presentations where they put up the slides and they just be jammed with words.
Oh,
And-
the worst.
And those were the people,
They read the whole thing.
yeah. And those were the people that didn't do any of the work. Like if you asked them a question and if it wasn't in the words on their slide, they were lost. It was the person that went up there that had a slide with one word on it that knew what they were talking about.
Right. Yep. Nice job. You guys do a great job. All of you. Well done.
Thank you. Um, sorry, I lost my agenda.
I don't think we have anything else, unless there's anything else people want to talk about.
So last,
Oh, go ahead. Were you saying something, Mary?
is this our last meeting? Kind
It
of.
is our last meeting and I just wanted to thank everybody. I know that this hasn't been, it's been more work than I think any of us anticipated. Not just, more on the time commitment side than anything else. So I appreciate everybody's commitment to this. I can already see that the work that this group has done is already making an impact on the town in a very positive way. So I am very, very thankful for all of you and appreciate you more than you know. So thank you very much for all your work.
It was a pleasure. Great working with all of you guys. So give me a sense of how does this work once it goes to the board? Let's say they agree, and then you go back out and people apply to be on the board, right? There's going to be an application process, or how's that going to work?
Yeah, so this committee will dissolve, and then a new committee will be established by the Board of Selectmen with the seats and the terms. And then, a public announcement will be made that the board is looking for people to fill the seats on the committee. You fill out an application and then have to go through the interview process again with the Board of Selectmen. And then the board will vote to appoint whoever's, whoever they see fit to serve on the committee.
Yeah, no, it's great. Great. Well, you guys did a tremendous job. I mean, everyone did a tremendous job, but Becca and Tim, you guys killed it. You really did. At the time, I can't even imagine how much time you put in behind the scenes. Clearly, I mean, it's clear to me you put a ton of time into this, and we wouldn't be where we are without the two of you. And that's no sugarcoating. A huge thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I do also want to say that I will likely be asking the board that if there are members of the current committee that want to continue to serve on the new committee, I will ask the board that they do give folks who have done a lot of this lifting sort of a first preference at being on the permanent committee, because I think that that's fair. And I think that if anybody who has been with us for the year wants to continue with the mission and the scope, that I think that they certainly deserve a spot on the permanent committee, at least for the initial term, to sort of get the ball rolling. So hopefully we'll have some familiar faces.
That's very nice. That's great. Okay, so now where do we go from here? So so the date is January.
Yeah, the date is January 24th.
Okay.
So I think the way this is going to work, to avoid having like 15 squares on the computer, what I'm going to ask is that the full committee attend the meeting, like be in the attendee list. And then Tim and Miriam, because you guys are presenting, I would have you guys be promoted as presenters during the portion of the meeting where we're doing the presentation. Obviously, if questions come up during the meeting and there are, things that other members of the committee want to say, I'm sure that the chair would be amenable to letting other members of the committee speak. But I think just for the sake of simplicity and not so there's 15 squares on the screen, it probably makes sense just to have Tim and Miriam up there while the presentation is being done. And then we'll go from there and see how the discussion evolves.
Great. Great job with the presentation, Miriam.
Yeah. Before we end, I also wanted to talk about one more thing. I, have been having dialogue and discussion with other people from other towns who've been a part of their diversity and inclusion committees, which has been helpful for me to kind of think about what else we can include in this report before we send it off. And I think we would be remiss to not mention something about policing, considering that this, and I don't want to, I know this is, a contentious issue, but we created this committee as a result of George Floyd's murder and the Black Lives Matter movement and protest in this country. And I think we have to mention, I think it is necessary and important that we mention that section of it. And I one of the additions that I thought of to our report, and we mentioned this a little bit in reviewing policies in the town, and we talked about this during this meeting a little bit, reviewing policies and being able to, that includes language through a racial equity lens and language that is gender inclusive. But I think we should include a recommendation that discusses how historically policies and police departments have systematically harmed communities of color and Black communities, and that specifically the Northborough Police Department should hire some type of consultant to do a thorough review of policies and practices in the department through an equity approach. And I think that is something important that we should include. And I would like to have a discussion about that. And I also think having building accountability, trust, and engagement in our community through something like a civilian review board would be really interesting. And I would love to have a discussion about that, because this would serve to build trust in public safety officials, but also have engagement through our community and being able to allow residents to bring concerns and complaints of discrimination or misconduct, and having something that's independent, transparent, and resourced, built by residents of our town, is something that's really interesting to me. And I think we should discuss it and or include it in our report. I know I've said a lot, but but I think before we send out this report, we should have a discussion about policing and have something that is. I just think that it came from that, and it is that is what diversity and inclusion is, and we have to have a discussion about that before we can say, oh, we created this committee and we sent out this report, but we didn't mention a recommendation that had to do with policing.
I think I agree with everything that you're saying. I do think that there's a more effective way to introduce it. I think if we go through the strategic planning process with a consultant and have people with a professional background in helping communities go through this process, work with them to come up with the right recommendation to make. Because I do believe that a recommendation like that, it shouldn't be just the police department. It should be every department. There's no reason to just do it for the police and not do it for the library. It just makes sense if we're going to do the whole community. And I think I think it will be a part of the strategic plan. I think having people that have done this with communities and how to best approach it so that you get buy-in and so that you don't get pushback will be very, very important. That's my initial reaction.
I agree with what you're saying.
I agree with all the points that you're making. I just think that there's a different process that we should go through in order to get to that end goal.
So I agree with you that absolutely what we have in the report and the strategic planning is good, but I think we explicitly need to include that that kind of language also in the report, along with saying there should be review of all town policies and things like the library, town officials, etc. But also I think we need to explicitly also say that that also includes the police. And that's not an attack to the Northborough Police Department. I think that's just giving space to communities of color and Black communities, and saying historically marginalized communities, and saying we are here as a committee to support you as well. And we are addressing this issue, and we want to recommend that to the board. That's where my perspective comes from.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tim. You're gonna say something.
No, if you have something to say, please.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for bringing that up. I think it's interesting. So we've had a lot of conversations, and I feel like that's a focus to some degree, but we also, I feel like there's like somewhat of a hesitation sometimes for us to go there. And so a lot of times I don't go there because I'm like, I don't want to blow things up if we don't need to blow things up. I know it's like the last meeting. But if are you saying essentially with this recommendation, whatever it would happen to be, is it an opportunity, you're saying, to bring some sort of outside entity in to not only help the diversity and inclusion effort, but then something more specific that laser focuses on what's happening in policing within the town of Northborough? Is that what other towns have done? Because I know you were saying you were talking with some folks. I just wonder if there would be an appetite for incorporating what Miriam's talking about to some degree within the report and the presentation. I don't know if it needs to be like, this is one set recommendation, like we have the 1 through 5, but a call out specific, a specific call out may be warranted if the team was comfortable making that recommendation. And I know that like the part of our charge, right? Like how we began, it was based off of this. So it may be amiss if we didn't explicitly speak on it.
I've read reports from the Shrewsbury PEI committee. They came out with their final recommendation, and they had several recommendations under that. But I think there's also Westboro, I think, has also talked about it. Another town I'm thinking of, but several towns have included that, and I think having that language is important.
I think it warrants a lot more discussion, and I just think we're too late in the process because I personally have some reservations about it. I understand the point, but when I wrote the charge for this, it was based off of what happened with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. It had nothing at all to do with the police department in Northborough or how the Northborough Police Department polices. And I'm hesitant to write a report with recommendations that specifically call out a department that we don't even know if they have problems or not.
That's exactly how I feel. That is exactly how I feel. And I completely understand what you're trying to communicate, Miriam, and maybe it's a charge for this next committee. Put that as a priority for the next committee, but I just don't see, we haven't had complaints from our Northborough Police Department. And I just don't think that personally, it is another huge conversation, and I don't think we have the space for it. I just don't, I don't see it right now. Maybe
It warrants a discussion. It should be discussed. I just don't think that we have
next
time.
early priority for the next committee.
I think in saying that we don't know if the Northborough Police Department has issues or not, we're not saying they have issues or not. I think in saying that there should be a review of it is in itself setting out a recommendation. I feel as though that statement does not say that there's something wrong with the police department in our town. But
Can I just, if you were to put yourself in Chief Liver's shoes or one of the detective shoes, and read our report, and they're the only ones that get called out specifically, how do you, like, that reflects on them? It does reflect on them.
It requires a lot of work to put that on paper. I think we need to really have a huge conversation about that. I think it's a priority for the next committee. And I understand that our communities that surround us have incorporated it into their recommendations, but we haven't really talked about that. And I think it requires a lot of input from every member of this committee, of which three of them aren't here, you know? It's a serious topic.
Yes.
And I completely understand, Miriam. I am with you. I think it's a priority, 100%. I just don't think we're prepared to put it in print without feeling like we're calling out our local police department, because we're not. Does that make sense?
I have to say, unfortunately, that while from your perspective, it feels like the police department is being attacked, I feel like people of color in our community are going to see this and say, well, you didn't hear us.
Why do you feel that way? What makes you feel that way?
Because she feels it.
I think
No, help me understand, like, what part of our recommendation would people of color not feel that we've done what we can in a 12-month period of time? Not we're not ending the committee. We're recommending that we continue, that we have a lot of work to do, and make that a recommendation for, next year. But I just don't feel like, I don't know. I'm uncomfortable.
You have to understand that I don't want this to be contentious, but I'm feeling a lot right now, and I don't really want to have a conversation that makes me really stressed. I'm not, creating this to say I'm like fighting with any of you, or I think we're like, but I think this is a conversation that needs to be had by a diversity and inclusion committee. And I think I feel a lot right now. I feel really emotional about this right now. And I think explaining to you how many people of color feel about this and feel strongly about Black Lives Matter came from policing, and it came from, and I'm not saying it, again, I don't know. I feel a lot right now, and I don't know if I can really explain that properly right now.
I can jump in for a minute. Yeah. So, Mary, I think your question was something like, explain why people of color may not feel that, or may feel like there was a mark that was missed potentially, or we didn't cover everything. I think when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, it has so many different aspects, right? And I think we've all appreciated that through these conversations. I think that when I saw the call for folks to join this committee, and it was saying, George Floyd was murdered. This is an opportunity for us to come together as a community and start to address some of these issues, whether it's systemic racism or other things. Let's get a team together to do that work. I think that we've talked about a lot of different elements. We haven't really talked about systemic racism. And it's a big chunk that we were trying to get into. We weren't an official committee, we still aren't. So I think that when someone of color I'll even use myself. If wasn't on this committee and I saw everything, I'd say, okay, look, it looks like, they're trying to touch on, Indigenous Peoples Day. That's a beautiful thing. And making sure that we have more inclusion from a gender perspective. But I don't know if there's anything in the report, aside from Juneteenth, that was really speaking to particularly Black people. I don't know about if we expanded the scope enough to cover all those different facets. I think what we have to how I'm walking away from this year, feeling like, we did enough to set a foundation. And now, to the team's point, like, this is the opportunity to continue to build on that. I don't know how we leave notes or leave some sort of, these are some things that were hot on our list. We didn't get to them, but we want to see movement on that in the future, not to the board necessarily, but maybe to the next committee, and let them know, like, these are some things that, like, some thought starters to try to make more action within Northborough. If the team here is, essentially saying, we don't have everybody, we don't have representation from the whole group here. And there's definitely some different views on the policing element. So that being the case, like, maybe that's the way for us to continue to see some movement in some of these other areas that we just didn't get a chance to dig into. And, I kick myself now, like, should have brought this up before, but I didn't. And so here we are having a conversation the last day. So maybe that's a way for us to, that's how I'll feel good about it, right? I feel good about a lot of what we did, but the fact that we didn't go down that path, I'm keeping it more as we set the foundation, and perhaps we provide some notes to whoever's next to continue to drive this forward.
Yeah, I'm not at all saying that I don't think it's an important priority. I think it's why we're all here. I just think that beginning that conversation about having a consultant come in and look at our police department tonight, it's January 6th, and we're preparing it's the 11th hour to talk about something so important. I mean, I agree 100%. That's why I'm here. My daughter's been dating a young man from Ghana for the last 4 years. I get it. I've heard the story. I don't live that life, but I've heard enough. That's why I'm here. I just feel that it's such a big conversation, and there's only 5 of us here. We can't effectively get that message out in the next 10 minutes without potentially offending our police department, which we admire and respect. And I'm not aware of any situations within, and if I've missed any, are there situations within our own police department that have occurred?
I don't know if anyone can answer that question. I also feel like we live in a small town, and if you are a person of color and you have a concern, there's really not an avenue to share that. Like, if I had a concern and I voiced it, it'd be pretty easy to figure out where I live. It'd be pretty easy. Like, you have to protect yourself and your family as well. So I think that this is a big question. It's a big issue, and it's complex. So I think and Mary, I adore you, but for us to say, like, hey, I haven't seen it, that doesn't mean that's not happening. So I think that's the piece that I wanted to kind of clarify, because if there was an issue, like, I personally would not raise it for a lot of different reasons.
Okay.
And that's as a Black woman. Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss something.
No, I haven't heard of anything personally, but the experiences that I have had, I wouldn't raise them, if that makes sense. So you would never hear it unless we talked.
And that's a problem.
That's a problem.
That is something that should be a priority. We need to have an outlet for people. It's probably not the police department. I don't know who it is, but there needs to family, and I don't know who that is, but that's a priority. Where do people go when they feel afraid?
Yep.
Concerned, worried, bullied?
Yeah.
That's a big deal. And that's not something we can accomplish in the next 10 minutes. I mean, that's a huge thing.
I think I echo everything that Shika said, and I too am yelling at myself, being like, why? But I also think you need to understand that like, there's a reason why we didn't mention it many times, because sometimes we just feel uncomfortable. I don't know if other people of color can relate to this, but I just felt uncomfortable sometimes. And that's the truth. Sometimes I just felt uncomfortable bringing that up. But I'm sitting here and I'm like, why didn't we talk about it? Because, and I'm not saying that we can solve systemic racism right now, right here. And this, committee is going to do that. But I think what Shika was saying about, setting up a foundation for this committee moving forward to be able to begin to resolve that is important. For the recommendation, mentioning or including a recommendation that says there should be an avenue. We should find some way for people of color, historically marginalized communities, to be able to share their concerns. And
or anyone.
Right.
Anyone who doesn't feel comfortable, whether it's a person of color or someone who has a gender issue, really, when you think about it, I mean, it's certainly people of color, but when you think about it, where do other people go? Nowhere. Or do they? I don't know. Maybe that's, I don't know. I'm just thinking.
I think for me, that's why I brought up the idea of a civilian review board. That sounds really dramatic, but it's a way, it's, an independent body that allows for people to be able to bring their concerns. And that's not something that I'm saying can be built up in a month or 2 months, but it's something that, we bring as a recommendation and can be constructed.
Can you help me understand what that is?
Sure. A civilian review board acts as like a transparent, independent board that includes residents, community leaders, anyone. And this can be something that's like constructed from this committee or the next DEI committee. It can even act as, I don't want to say a subcommittee because that's not right. It can be something that the committee creates and includes community members to be able to have a space where they can share issues of discrimination, issues of race, gender, religion, anything that they might want to bring forward. And this does not have to be, it's independent from the town's purview, or if that makes sense. I don't know. That sounds a little
so it gives
chaotic.
folks in the town a forum to share concerns, challenges that they faced among their peers.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if I have a strong feeling on that at this point. I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where we fit it in. Does it end up becoming its own thing in your eyes, Miriam? Like based on how we outlined our plan?
I think in my mind, it does become something of its own, like it becomes its own thing eventually. And the committee can take charge of it to build it. I think if we want to include language like this in our report, it can be something about saying just that. We don't have to say we can, what am I trying to say? In our report, we can basically have language that says that it is a independent body that the committee would moving forward be able to create and give space and a forum for residents to be able to share their experiences, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that, for example, the Shrewsbury report has an outlined detailed version and recommendation of what the Civilian Review Board would mean in their town. And it does not have to be the same thing. It can be something that we create in our own committee that is our own creation, if that makes sense.
I think I agree with the concept. It just warrants a lot more conversation that we just don't have the time for.
Did we keep the open night, saying like an open mic night? That's not what it was. It was like a discussion. Remember when we had our listening session? Thank you. I was like, I cannot think of the word. But when we had the listening session, we had said we'd recommend doing more of those. And did we keep that in the recommendation? Because it sounds similar. It's not exactly the same, Miriam, but it is a forum, at least within this recommendation that exists today. And then providing that those notes and foundational elements to the next iteration of this committee, maybe what you just recommended could be part of that.
Okay, perhaps we can have language that says, a recommendation that says continuing to have forums, listening sessions, and opportunities for dialogue and discussion. That could be a recommendation that we include.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that works. I know we had talked about continuing doing the listening sessions, so it kind of ties in with what we talked about as a larger committee with more of our members here. And the additional ads, I think I'd feel comfortable with. I don't know how everybody else feels.
So there's language in the recommendations now about the listening sessions. Oh my gosh, okay. Specifically, it says, while many of the suggestions or ideas were already in motion, either as part of the committee's process or separate from the committee, but within regular town operations, listening sessions are a tool that the committee would like to continue to use in the future. Direct evidence heard from participants during the listening session prompted the committee to include additional recommendations set forth in this document. So I think the implication there is that it is something that will continue to happen. And through those listening sessions, the committee will continue to take public input and frame their work and recommendations moving forward around that input. I mean, that's how I interpret that statement. I mean, that was how it was intended to be written, that we would continue. And part of my hope in the continuation of the committee is that there'll be an establishment of trust between the committee and the community through the work we've already done and the work that we continue to do, and that people will feel comfortable down the road, hopefully in the short or long term, coming to committee members and talking about those things, even if they're in confidence, just so that then someone can bring it to the committee to have a bigger discussion about it. So maybe someone says something to Tim offline and Tim comes back and says, hey, I had a conversation with someone in private. We need to talk about X, Y, and Z. And that was always sort of my intention with wanting to continue with the committee, because the Civilian Review Board, I mean, if it's an extension of our committee, it can't be independent from the town, because we are a committee of the board and the board is the executive board of the town. So and I do have some concerns about like legal issues, reporting issues. If there are staff people on that committee, you know, what is the responsibility if they hear things? There's just a lot of detail that I would want to dig into before we put something like that in front of the board. I don't think it's out of the question. I do think that through the strategic plan, it's very possible that a recommendation like that will come through that process as part of that study. And like I said before, you know, when you have a consultant that's backing you up, that's saying this is what you should be doing because it's the right move for the community and they're a professional, you know, those discussions with the police department and board members and other public safety and staff, those conversations have already happened. So a lot of that trust has been developed and there's an understanding that like we're all on the same page and prepared to move forward. And that's the value that the strategic planning process, that's the value it brings to me, I think. And like having that process to shepherd through these difficult conversations, I think will be helpful for us as a committee and helpful for the community overall. And so I don't want to, I hear what you're saying, Miriam, and I wanted to have those difficult conversations early on. And I think that, you know, when we were 9 people, we had a short timeline and there were a lot of ways our committee could have gone. And I think we sort of ended up going in one direction. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think a lot of good came out of our work. But the point I want to make is I know that there's still a lot of work to be done. And so while the timing is hard for me because it is our last meeting and we're getting ready to make these final recommendations, I want to acknowledge that I hear what you're saying, and I do think that there's space for what you're saying in the future of the committee, and I want to see that come through. So I'm open to modifying the language in the recommendations a little bit so that we can maybe be a little bit more clear about sort of the direction we want to go in. But I want to be careful about doing anything very drastic only because of the timing. And there are other people that I would have wanted to have the opportunity to talk to us about, like the Civilian Review Board. And so that's how I'm feeling, but I'm, you know, open to continuing the discussion.
I see what you say. I think what you're saying is very valid and fair. That yeah, I don't know. If anyone has anything else to say, I think we should like add that language and edit it, but I'm not sure.
I just hope that you don't feel disappointed, Miriam, because I think, I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody, but I would think that that was a really top priority for everybody. And there was just so much to cover in this year, you know, and it's still a priority. And it needs to be discussed at the beginning of next year. So I hope you don't feel not neglected, but that I just think we ran out of time. No.
I think, well, this is definitely, you know, what we've done is only touching the surface. I want to thank people for giving me the space for this discussion tonight. And I think like this work is not done. As we've discussed, we're really just touching the surface. And I think continuing to think about what we can do to improve our town and make it a space for all of our community members is why we're all here and why we participated in it in this committee and, you know, spent our time. And I think that speaks volumes, but yeah, for sure, our work here is not done. It's not going to continue. We're going to continue to do this work, but yeah.
Yeah, it takes a long time. There's a lot of complexities and the other part to consider too is, you know, I work with companies that do this professionally, and they have full-time staff that do this 60 hours a week and have a team, and they do this full time. We're 9 people that meet twice a month. So considering the resources that we have available, like I'm very proud of the work that we were able to accomplish this year. This is not an easy thing to do. In conversations I've had with people, this is their first introduction to these types of topics. And that is such a huge step in the right direction for the community. That in itself is just having people introduced to these topics and being open and receptive to moving forward and looking at things and making changes. And that's a huge step. And it's nothing, it's without that first huge step, nothing else is going to happen. So I don't want to, you know, lose sight of that. And, you know, Shika, you mentioned the foundation, and that's what this is. This is the foundation. And the foundation, I've always been very cognizant of that, and it needs to be, you need the support of the community in order to have a strong foundation. And I think that's one of the things that we need to be very mindful of is making sure that we're working with the community and including everybody in the discussions and having open and transparent discussions about every step that we want to take. And Miriam, I just think it's, if we were to include something about the police department, we'd be missing that aspect of things. The thorough conversation, the transparent conversations, the including of everybody that needs to be included in the conversations. And I think that's something that the committee should take on next year, along with the, you know, consultants if they're brought in, because it's hard. It's hard. If it were easy, every community would have a diversity and inclusion committee. Anybody have anything else they'd like to add tonight? Becca, you'll work on some of that language.
Yeah, Miriam, if you're open to it, let's connect offline and look at some of the language in the final recommendations. I think there's some places where we can be a little bit more explicit without, you know, stepping on anyone's toes. And I think that the nature of our committee probably wants that acknowledgement.
Absolutely.
So let's put our heads together soon.
Yeah.
What I'll do is I'll highlight some stuff and make some changes, and I'll send you a draft, and we can touch base. And then when Miriam and I finish, we'll send the final draft out for final comments from the group before it goes to the board, if that's good with everyone.
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay.
And then Miriam, you'll get the additional slides put in.
We'll send that out to you guys hopefully tomorrow, latest the day after. So you guys can look at that. Let me know if there's anything you want to see. Proofread, edit, change, anything confusing.
Yeah. And Miriam, thank you for bringing those topics up. It's again, it's not an easy discussion, and it takes courage, and I know it's not an easy thing to bring up. So thank you for bringing those up and introducing those topics and leading the discussion on that.
Thank you. I appreciate the space to be able to talk about this tonight, and I wish we'd had more time, but I hope that these conversations continue to happen, and they are happening in our communities, but continue to happen, as we move forward with this committee, and we can resolve them.
Yeah, yeah. And if you don't happen, if you don't happen to join the next iteration of the committee, you just call in every week.
That's right.
So, all right, sounds good. Anybody have anything else? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Moved by Miriam, second by Becca. Roll call vote. Mary Leach,
Aye.
Sheikha Holland.
Aye.
Miriam Ibrahimi. Becca Meekins.
Aye.
And I, Tim Kalen, vote aye. And we are adjourned for the last